Hi, this is Sean Halter, host of the CMO Suite podcast, letting you know that as we kick off Season 4, several of these episodes were recorded in New York City just prior to the COVID outbreak. At the end of this episode, stick around for a follow-up as to how our guest is making their way through today's current marketing environment and what they see as the next opportunity. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and catch up on all the previous episodes at www.thecmosuite.com. This episode of the CMO Suite is brought to you by Uconnect. Uconnect provides digital solutions and teams to brand CMOs, VPs, and marketers looking for true transparency in the biddable media space. From paid social and PPC to complex platforms like The Trade Desk, brands from across the world have connected to Uconnect. Visit them today at uconnect.com. And No Kid Hungry. We're proud to promote No Kid Hungry and their many initiatives to help kids in need of meals. Visit them at nokidhungry.org. This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. Winmo tracks every national advertiser, their agency relationships, and key executives within each organization. Get instant media spend, competitor tracking, and industry trend analysis in one easy-to-use application that integrates with all major CRM platforms. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite. Finally, the CMO Suite is presented by the CMOcouncil.org as their official marketers podcast. The Chief Marketing Officer Council is the only global network of executives specifically dedicated to high-level knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and personal relationship building among senior corporate marketing leaders and brand decision makers. The CMO Council's 15,000 plus members control more than $550 billion in aggregated annual marketing expenditures and run complex distributed marketing and sales operations worldwide. For more information on membership, visit thecmocouncil.org. Let's start the show.
You're in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know. Presented by Connectivity Holdings.
Hello. It is Sean Halter, and welcome to Season 4 of the CMO Suite. We are, as we often are, live in New York City. We are at iHeart Studio. Bill Plack's working the board for me. I've got Stacey Horton over there co-hosting with me. Hello, Stacey.
Hi, Sean Halter.
It is always nice to be here in familiar surroundings. And again, iHeart keeps letting us come back. Either Bill has not told them yet that we're probably not even supposed to be in the studio, or maybe we're so nice to them we bring cookies or cakes or something sometimes. But it's always great to be here. And what I've always found fascinating about New York is just the different array of people that are here that work in the industry and really the interesting things that they do. So I'm excited to have as my guest today, Cerise Vasquez Wright. Cerise, it's lovely to have you on with us today.
I'm so excited to be here.
So Cerise is somebody I've known for several years. I've known her from a few of the different companies that she's worked at before. We're gonna kind of go down memory lane a little bit when it comes to that. And right now she's working as a contractor on some projects for Facebook, and I want to make sure that we hit a little bit on that as well. But Cerise, let's talk mostly about where you grew up to kind of start things off. So did you grow up here in the city, or where did you grow up?
So I grew up for the most part in Queens. Queens, baby.
In the house.
In the house. But then I spent 10 years in Miami, coming from immigrant parents. We couldn't afford real estate here in New York City, so we moved to Miami.
Where are your parents from? You said they're immigrants. Where did they come from?
Dominican Republic.
Both of them, your mom and your dad?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And so they settled in Queens for a bit, and then you guys moved down to Miami?
Yeah, so I consider myself a New Yorker, but not a jaded New Yorker because of those 10 years I had in Miami.
There's so many people that move from New York down to Miami. There's got to be, somebody maybe even told me there's some term for people who are from both New York and Miami. I don't remember what it is. I'm sure it's some combination of New York or Miami. I don't know, whatever it is. But you're one of those. How long did you spend down in Miami? Did you spend your high school years down there?
Yep. The formative years of junior high and high school.
Years.
Yeah. Came back for college and have stayed here since.
So are you bilingual? Do you speak Spanish and English?
Sí se puede. Yes, I do.
Puede. You almost have to if you live down in Miami. Because it's predominantly Spanish in many places. In many places,
although it's changed a bit, over the last few years. But yeah, speak Spanish. Grew up speaking Spanish. My kids speak Spanish, and growing up with a mixed household here in New York City now. But yeah, super important language.
And you've got a couple of kids. You said 8 and 9. Am I close?
Yes. Yep.
Little boy, little girl.
Yes. $1 million family.
There you go. Which one's older, the little boy or the little girl?
The girl.
We have that as well. We have twin 16-year-olds. Our daughter is she's 3 minutes older than her brother.
Oh, wow. She holds them to it, I bet.
She sure does. She sure does. If only you knew. What's cool about family and even kids, just to cover that for just a second, my daughter, you never know what your kid's going to be like, right? So my son is so much like my wife's side of the family, which I just not would have originally thought, but he's just the sweetest, just the nicest kid in the world. And my daughter's kind of like me. She's always just kind of sizing things up a little bit and always kind of trying to work an angle a little bit. But as she's grown and over time, she actually helps me with the podcast now. She does all of our banners and a lot of our branding for it. And that's so cool to be able to kind of have one of your kids work on something that's really important to you. And I've loved being able to do the podcast. And so a shout out to Delaney. If you see a banner, if that's what you clicked on to get to the show, my daughter built that. How cool is that?
Awesome.
She gets paid to do it. And so, that's why she does it and does it well, probably because she's always like, hey dad, I need $50 to go buy a ticket to some concert or something. Can I do some work? So that's good. You want to instill that in them pretty young. So
for sure.
Do you feel like that was something that your parents kind of instilled with you? I feel like you've always had this kind of hard work ethic. When we've had a chance to work together in the past in some of your previous places, I always felt like you were one of those people that was always kind of pushing yourself just as hard as you were pushing those people that work with you.
Yes, and I appreciate your partnership all those years because I know I can be a difficult partner, Sean, and you guys were always amazing helping us with last minute requests, working on some high profile campaigns. And so, I mean, growing up in the city, the hustle is real, and
The hustle is real.
Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people that whichever opportunity I'm given, I want to just excel at it. And so, yeah.
So you feel like you got some of that from your parents, and it kind of sticks throughout time. Is there an element these days of this kind of millennial culture? Is the millennial culture real? Is it not real, where there is some balance between you're supposed to work hard because this is your job, and all this conversation around work-life balance? And even you and I have had that conversation a few times of like, I don't know, maybe the millennials are onto something. Maybe we're not supposed to be working 12-hour days and we're supposed to be spending a little time on ourselves. What's the right mix? I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I will say I'm probably the oldest millennial ever. I think I probably made it by a month. But with that said, we, grew up in a time where we would go pay for music, right? We would go to Tower Records and we'd pay for CDs. Millennials, for the most part, don't know what that means. Millennials, for the most part, want to have the work-life balance, but what we didn't have that they have is this always on world. And I think that they are trying to overcome a lot of the setbacks that have come with that, and trying to make the best of it. And so I understand them pushing back and saying, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I'm out. I get it.
And maybe, again, to that point, maybe there is something we can kind of learn from that. Music has always been a part of your life or your trajectory, or at least it's played some role, it seems like, from the time that you worked at Hut 97 as a PR publicist, and even some of your work with Tidal, and then ultimately your work with MW. Did I get that right? MWWPR, right?
Yes, that's it. MWWPR.
And so I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast a couple of days ago. He had Adam Curry on, who was one of the first VJs at MTV. Remember that, Stacey?
Yes.
Wow. Adam Curry. He's known as the Podfather because he was one of the first podcasters, which I did not know. But he was talking about some of the things that you just mentioned again, which is remembering buying a record and remembering doing these things. He purposely does not have an iPhone. He has a flip phone of some sort because he felt like he was too connected. He felt like, you walk around New York and I think one of the things that he said that was interesting is you walk around New York City, or maybe any city to some extent, and you look around and everybody's looking down at their phone. Nobody's looking at each other anymore. So
how connected are you really when you're always connected?
Exactly.
Right.
Not quite connected.
So as a VP or as a CMO or as a head of a marketing organization, and you're trying to figure out your balance with either your internal team or what do you need to add to your team, or you're frustrated because the millennials that you have there, loyalty has always been something that was instilled in my generation. Right. Even if you didn't make the most or you didn't have the best job, you had to be loyal to those that got you there. That question of what is loyalty anymore does become a little bit of a blended space. So where do you feel like that world lives, Cerise, since you're kind of almost in between this world of loyalty is everything and this millennial generation of like, I don't know, let me go work a different job?
You know what? Sometimes you have to step away. And I did that. I had to make the very difficult decision to step away from working on some really high profile campaigns, with people like Tidal and Hot 97 and Cardi B and Beyonce. And it was a privilege to to be in that room and help plan some of those activations. But after 3 years of doing that as a marketer who was working 15, 18 hours a day, not having a life, just feeling really burnt out, I walked away. And I guess maybe that was the millennial in me that said, hey, this is enough, you know?
And so talk about that trajectory, maybe to some extent. What were you doing when you were at Hot 97? Were you dealing again mostly with artists on that side of it? And how did marketing play a role in that ultimately as you continue to move from there on to some other organizations? Yeah,
so when you think of a radio station and one like Hot 97 that is one of the top rated in the nation for hip hop urban music, you think, well, they are the PR. What do you mean you were doing publicity for them? The thing is, with a lot of these brands, including radio stations, you don't want to necessarily just be known as a radio station. You want to be known as the source for up and coming rising artists, for new music. So my job there while I was there was to help change the conversation about the station. It's no longer just a radio station, but it is where you're going to learn new music, things that are happening in life and lifestyle culture. And so some of the things I was doing there was getting them mentions on places like TMZ TV for a concert that Colin Kaepernick had attended shortly after he left the NFL. Cardi B had been there, and also shining a light on some of the artists like Belly that partnered with Hot 97 to bring to light some conscious rap, some conscious kind of movement among the urban community.
So PR is an interesting component when you think of that urban community to some extent. As an old white guy in my 50s, my club age is 39. I can't get away with that anymore. Can I? 44? What am I, 46? Somebody help me out here. It is hard sometimes, again, maybe for a VP or a CMO, if they're my age, which many of them are, or they came from my background, it is hard to wrap your head around understanding that culture. We were talking about the fact that we are at iHeart Studios today. Somebody was in on the Breakfast Club this morning, and certainly you could smell through the air the natural smell,
the herbal essence.
But as an older white guy, you might feel like, well, what is that? You might have a negative connotation to that, but really, people are people, and it. Is there an element of PR that's an important part to just let people know people live different lifestyles, guys, and you can't make everybody you.
Right.
And if you're trying to talk to everybody the way that you want to be talked to, you're missing a ginormous and growing swath of this country. So what role do you feel like PR kind of plays in evolving that to some extent? Well,
PR is just that. PR is strategizing the message. It's pivoting the message. When we look at TV today, it's the pivot, it's the message. And so when you're able to drive that, you can drive conversation.
There is still an element of media where they're framing the messaging. And so PR needs to continue to either butt up against that or provide, again, just a different perspective or an alternative perspective to it. So you spent some time in PR, but then you also you kind of pivoted and got into paid media and analytics to some extent when you were at MWW. So how did you make that transition, and talk to us a little bit about your time there and what you enjoyed? Because you were there for almost 3 years, really.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. You had, I believe it was Dia Lawrence here.
I love Dia. She's awesome.
She is. I was listening to her podcast a few weeks ago with you guys, and, she said something that made a lot of sense, and it was, in this business you have to continue to reinvent yourself, and she mentioned Madonna, right? And that's it. And so having worked in the business for as long as I have, when I really think about it, hasn't been that long, but this industry marketing has transformed itself in the last 12 years. 13 years ago, all this was emerging media. And now it's like, whoa, wait a minute. What's the new app? What's the new technology? Cookies is going to be, we're not going to have cookies anymore. How are we going to do this? How am I going to target my demographic? So there's so many conversations, and in order to be successful, I've had to reinvent myself. And so I do that by partnering with, sometimes these freelance opportunities give me that opportunity to learn something new, like let's say with Facebook, but also make me aware and keep me on my toes, because otherwise, how am I going to walk into a room and say, hey, I got your answer. This is what you need to do because this is what the people are doing. And marketing is all about people. If I'm not out there reinventing myself and learning more.
So talk about Facebook then for just a second. Tell us how the contractor position maybe came about and maybe a little bit more about what you're doing with the brand.
Yeah, so a lot of it is, Facebook has been around for years now, and I think most marketers will agree it's like, a baseline now for marketing plans. And so what they're trying to do is continue to maintain their relevancy as you have other players coming out into the field like TikTok, right? So what they do is they partner with people like myself who works in the business, who's been in the business for a while, and essentially ask me questions like, how do you think this particular product or service, would that be helpful to someone like you? And I'll give you the example. When I first partnered with them back last June, they were asking me a series of questions based on my experience with title streaming and some of the other artists that I have worked with. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were essentially gathering information because what they wanted to do, in my opinion, was roll out this new fan subscription model, which they just rolled out two months ago. And again, it's it's a new model where essentially influencers, people like Tidal, Nicki Minaj can charge their fans for a subscription and give them exclusive access. And again, of course, you have to evolve the business. And this is how Facebook is doing that, partnering with people like me to learn more about how they can best do that.
Well, I think a lot of the brands that take the time to do that kind of research save themselves a lot of pain sometimes by to the point of the conversation we had earlier, which is you don't know everything there is to know unless you talk to people that are in the space who have some knowledge about it. And certainly at their size and their scope, they're always out there trying to build different things and to reinvent themselves to some extent. And I've always viewed Facebook, or really any social media form, in some ways it is like the nightclub. So, you go back to MySpace. That's how old I am. When finally somebody who's in their 30s jumps on MySpace, that's when everybody who's in their 20s decides, I'm going to Facebook. And when everybody who's in their 30s and 40s jumps on Facebook is when everybody in their teens and 20s says, I'm going to Instagram. Right. And now that all of us are slowly making our way over to Instagram, that's where TikTok, seems to be.
TikTok's where it's at right now.
Where it's at.
Yeah.
So, and there have been other platforms, certainly in their Snapchat, had some role in there, and they probably still do to some extent. But it is interesting to kind of see the role that social plays, especially in looking at just that. TikTok will be maybe the thing, or maybe Snapchat will find some way to make a comeback, and it'll be around a little longer, and then the next thing will end up being right behind it. It will be interesting to see whether that next thing is an international platform like TikTok is to some extent. That isn't to say that Facebook isn't as well, but Facebook initially was homegrown here to some extent, as was MySpace. So it'll be interesting to see what level that international comes to play. So, well, listen, I've got a few more minutes with you. I want to, first of all, thank you again for coming in and joining us on the show. As I said, we love to have guests from a variety of backgrounds and from a variety of different experience levels. Talk to me about what's next, Cerise. What's next for you? Where do you feel like you want to be out there in the marketplace, or where do you feel like you want to continue to grow?
That's a great question, Sean.
I try to ask good ones when I can.
And to be quite honest and be super transparent, I'm looking to bring all my agency bravado in-house. I've been doing this for so long, and I feel like I want to grow roots. The agency life, as we all know, can be crazy. I'm going to keep it real. And I think that I've garnered so many interesting traits working in SEO and PR and influencer marketing. It's like, you know what? I want to grow a brand from the ground up. And so that's where I'm at. And I'm excited. Sometimes you just gotta walk the walk and figure it out.
Well, we're excited to see where you go. As always, anything we can do to help, we're always happy to do so. I value your friendship, and I value the opportunity to continue to see what you do out in the marketplace. You have some great relationships, and you've got some really, I think, smart thinking. And so brands that work with you are certainly, they're taking, the opportunity to build off of just that. So listen, we want to thank you for being part of season 4. Cerise Vasquez Wright, thank you for joining us. So Cerise Vasquez, thanks for coming back and joining us. Are you in New York City right now?
Yes, I am.
So been working out of New York. That didn't change. Did you end up traveling at all kind of during this COVID situation, or did you stay in New York the whole time?
We were at the epicenter the whole time.
So that in itself was obviously a little bit crazy. And then as we start to kind of work our way out of that, then we find ourselves obviously kind of in this next moment. And certainly that's a moment, that's a watershed moment. And for you, I would imagine, again, from a diversity standpoint, it's something that you've lived with every day, and provide, at least from your perspective, what you feel like that guidance has been in the city, and just your thoughts on it.
Now, are we talking about the pandemic or the current movement happening?
Well, I think let's talk about either one. I mean, obviously the pandemic was what it was, and it certainly felt, scary in some ways and unpredictable in some ways, but the movement has certainly surpassed that. And it's where I think many of us will look back at at COVID as whatever it is and was, and how it impacted our lives. This movement is certainly very groundswell in the fact that it's become what it's become, and it's certainly created a dialogue in ways I've never really seen it in my lifetime. Some of those obviously hurtful in some ways, perhaps, and negative, but in a lot of ways, I feel like it's been an incredible moment for people to really try to be self-reflective and to listen. That's something a lot of us don't do well when we're not in the middle of it.
Agreed. I couldn't agree with you more, Sean. I feel like we are living in fascinating times, very fascinating, and we have the privilege to be able to talk about it and have these tough conversations. I applaud my colleagues on LinkedIn who are coming out and speaking out in a professional way about the systematic oppression of Black people. And it sounds so harsh to even say those words, but it's the reality that we face when you look at leadership, executive leadership at the big companies like Facebook and Google and Spotify even, right? Some of these culturally relevant companies, when you look at their leadership, there's no representation there. And so you got to think, what's going on here? And obviously there's some, there's a lot of unconscious bias. There's a lot of, some people may not even want to admit it, but there's a lot of kind of tribal mentalities that we're not even aware of that we have. And these conversations that we're having now are beautiful, are thought-provoking, need to be had, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, because if we don't have these conversations now, then when are we going to have them?
To dovetail off of that a little bit, whether it's LinkedIn or it's Facebook or it's Instagram or any of them, clearly the dynamic of social during this movement, again, is something we've never seen before. And for those, who look like me, who might sometimes go through life and just feel like, well, the world is better. And, I've got friends of all races and colors and creeds. And so I'm sure most people feel that way. It is social that is allowing many of us who feel like life must be okay now to really realize it's never really been okay. And that's hard to see and know. And there's guilt clearly in a lot of situations of feeling like I didn't think I knew. I probably knew, but I didn't know. And so that dialogue has been fascinating to see everybody. And I guess you just hope that it becomes more than just dialogue. It becomes real action. And how do you do that? How do you feel like you do that as a brand, Cerise? How do you move beyond just, I want to listen, and actually do something that's meaningful?
Again, I applaud my colleagues of different backgrounds getting on platforms and calling out some of these corporations and calling out some of these, posts that we're seeing that look beautiful. But what we need here is action. We need action. And does that mean having an interview process that's blind, right? So that the names and how people look, you can't see it during the interview process. I don't know. There has to be a systematic change and there has to be action. So yes, words are beautiful and we love that. We love the energy, but we need to do something about it. And what people of color like myself as an Afro-Latina are asking for, it's just an opportunity to have a seat at the table. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but give us the opportunity. A lot of candidates are, not being able to interview because whatever, like it just the name or, people have these biases that,
you don't even realize. So we have to figure out how to work through them. And I think one of the things that I love that I'm seeing is the call outs of these corporations that have these practices where there's no diversity within leadership, calling out the bigots that you are seeing, and the overt racism that you are seeing, calling them out. Like, hey, we have this video of this teacher, our good friend Leland posted that, being really like out there with the racism and offending children that are peacefully protesting in her neighborhood. Why? Yeah. So we have to call that out. And yes, we've all been under quarantine and we're all stressed out. And I get that.
Maybe that quarantine plays an impactful role that maybe without it, again, we're not all stuck inside. We're not all on our social media all the time. We're just going through our normal lives. We see this news story of some crazy lady in the park or something unfortunate, that happened to somebody we don't know in a city we don't live in. Maybe we almost needed all of these elements in place for this to have the impact that it is clearly having, for so many people to stand up and rise up, whether it's, African Americans or it's kids or it's Latinas or whatever, again, whatever that is. Maybe we almost needed all of that dynamic. And so from your perspective, again, as both a female and as a Latina, do you feel like this will change, and will it change again for many others across many other cultures?
I hope so. The movement keeps going. People are tweeting. People are bringing out new videos and new cases that are showing the police brutality aspect of this movement, which obviously started this fire, but there are so many other things we want to address. And I think it keeps going. I think people like you and I need to continue that fight. I have to say, if it wasn't for the uprising that we had just last week in this country and globally, I don't know if those murder charges would have been upgraded. I don't know if those other officers who were diverse officers, you saw them.
Sure.
It's not a black and white thing. It's a humanity issue. And along with that comes, we've had the systematic oppression of people of color. How can we help? How can we help? I posted a video, or I posted a post with Billy Joel's quote, "We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire, but we try to fight it." And that was the Thursday when the rioting began. And my husband, who is Caucasian, said, "Do you really want to post that on LinkedIn? This is not the place." And I said, "Honey, I love you. Thank you for that. I am not in any way condoning fires and rioting, but we need to have this conversation.
Time to start the
Why is this happening? We need to address it. We need to make change."
Well, Cerise Vasquez, we're going to see where this takes us. It's an exciting time, I think, for a lot of us just who are ready for change and who are ready to see that happening out in the marketplace. So appreciate you meeting us in New York and allowing us again to come back and catch back up with you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to get back in the city together once some of this is worked through, and hopefully we can take a time in the future and have an even deeper conversation about it.
Thanks for hanging out in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You're a C-level manager. You shouldn't have to know the difference between behavioral or contextual targeting, but your agency should. Uconnect provides brands and biddable teams direct access to platforms like The Trade Desk, Google, Amazon, Facebook, OTT, and more. Their US-based traders can train your in-house team or provide complete transparency with no minimums and CPM-based service pricing for true transparency. Something Mighty Hive, The Trade Desk, and Centro simply don't offer. Tired of being the smartest one in the room? Reach out to Uconnect today for a free demo. Uconnect, the world's leader in true transparent biddable media.
This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite.